So these are the disembarkation rules you need to know. And also, we're going to talk about desperate escape and emergency tactics in Warhammer 40K on Rapid Fire Tactics episode 24. So stay tuned and locked in while we break this down for you. How disembarkation works in Warhammer 40K. Me and Regal are going to get this started today, and we're going to break down multiple FAQs and exactly what it means to disembark and desperate escape, and other rules as well.
So here we have the disembark rule. It says if a unit from your army starts your movement phase embarked with a transport model, that unit can disembark in that phase. When a unit disembarks from a transport model, set it up on the battlefield so that it is wholly within 3 inches of that transport model and not within engagement range of any enemy models. If, for any reason, a disembarking model cannot be set up, that model's unit cannot disembark. Units that disembark from a transport model that either remains stationary this phase or has not yet made a normal move, advance, or fallback move this phase can then act normally, making a normal move, advance, shoot, and declare a charge and fight as they would if they were started on the battlefield themselves in the remainder of the turn. Such a disembarking unit cannot choose to remain stationary. Units that disembark from a transport model that made a normal move this phase count as having made a normal move themselves. They cannot move further during this phase. Such a unit cannot also declare a charge in the same turn, but can otherwise act normally for the remainder of the turn. Units cannot disembark from a transport model that either advanced or fell back this turn. There was a lot there. So to break it down piece by piece, first, obviously, you need a transport model. Rhinos, devilfish, raiders, repulsors are the more common ones you'll see. And you can, of course, store models in them. I believe, and we may get to an FAQ over here, if you do take a dedicated transport, you must start something inside that model at the start of the battle. You can't just have an empty Rhino on the battlefield.
That is absolutely correct.
And then setting things up outside that model, you get, as it says set up, if the whole unit cannot fit wholly within 3 inches of that model, it can't get out. And this is something that it refers to a tactic commonly called wrapping a vehicle, where you have, say, a 20-man Krieg squad charge an enemy Rhino and then literally wrap completely around it base to base. So then there is no room for the models inside to get out outside of an inch or 1.1 inches, and also fit wholly within that 3-inch bubble. So you kind of trap them in their own shell. There's other reasons as well, such as, say, if you're on a weird terrain map and terrain density, they couldn't get out without being partly in a wall. That's also not allowed. Or your own models. If you just kind of parking lot of yourself and they can't physically fit on the table, you cannot, say they're there and they can't actually be there. And then these models, once they get out, what are they allowed to do? Well, if your transport model did not move this turn, they can act normally. They can do whatever you would have them do. Move their movement characteristic and make advances, shoot, do actions, charge, all of that normal stuff. If the vehicle advanced or fell back, they cannot even get out, period. They are stuck inside. Unless you have a specific stratagem or model rule accepting or allowing that, making an allowance for it, they stay in the vehicle that turn. And then finally, if your vehicle does move up, models can get out if they're following all the rules wholly within 3 outside of engagement. They cannot move or declare a charge, but they can still maybe do an action or shoot. Those are not excluded. The remain stationary thing, there used to be a lot of rules that keyed off if you remain stationary. You could shoot twice, for example, or get +1 to your save. I don't know how many of those have remained in the game, but this is a good way for them to... also heavy. Heavy is probably the most prominent remain stationary rule that remains in 10th edition. That being, if your model does not move, remain stationary, you get +1 to your ballistic skill for that shooting phase. Models that get out of a vehicle cannot benefit from that. And they also count as having made a normal move, which in the most common cases can trigger either Overwatch or enemy reactive moves, such as from some Chaos Spawn units or the Dominions from Sisters of Battle, for example.
And with that being said, you might want to read the question, the FAQ that it has right next with the reactive move.
I may have got ahead of myself. So moving on. Question: can I make a reactive move, i.e. a move or other form of repositioning triggered by an event such as an enemy unit ending a move within a certain distance of my unit, Grey Knight's Mist of Deimos stratagem, for example, or Kroot Trail Shaper's trail finding ability, when an enemy unit disembarks from a transport that has already moved this phase? No, as that disembarking unit has not made a normal move, it only counts as having made one. So disregard my last point I made. The vehicle can trigger your move.
Exactly why I brought it up.
If anyone wonders why we do these episodes, take that last 60 seconds and just clip it. There you go. This is a good time to state we are human as well. There are a lot of rules that have complex interactions, so we're learning as we are trying to teach you. I mean, right. Me. I'm learning. I was trying to not embarrass myself. Next question from the FAQ. When a rule instructs a player that they must set up a unit on the battlefield, such as disembarking from a destroyed transport, emergency disembarkation, we will get to that later, or a drop pod assault ability, if there is not enough space to set up every model on that unit, while adhering to any limitations on where those models can be set up, what happens to the unit and the models that cannot be set up? That unit can still be set up, but any models that cannot be are destroyed. See set up on the battlefield in the rules commentary. That is another section you can go to see the relative rules. Those models are considered to have been destroyed by the opponent's army, but not by any specific models or units. So this is saying that you don't have to lose the whole unit if you're forced to put them out of the vehicle, not choosing to place them. You don't have to lose the whole unit. But say you have a 10-man, you can only fit 7. 3 of your guys got to go to the graveyard.
What's also relevant is that it states that, but not by any specific models or units. So if there's any abilities that are triggered by you have destroyed this model, will not be triggered by this itself.
Yes, and that's what I was going to say. It does specify not any models or units, so things that get buffs for killing don't necessarily do that.
You still get the destroyed, so you still get your secondaries, your primaries, and things like that say once you destroy, a unit that's been destroyed. But if it specifically states you have to destroy it, you won't get those perks.
Yeah, such for an example, the Emperor's Children attachment that says an Emperor's Children unit destroyed an enemy unit. Right. They don't get the credit for that scorekeeper thing on that attachment. Right. But for Purge the Foe or No Prisoners, you would, because they do count. On to the next question. If I set up a transport using rapid ingress stratagem, can units embarked on that transport disembark that phase? No. And might I say, thank God. That would be obnoxious.
It would.
This is just saying if you wrap it in, I don't know, for no reason, let's say a Tantalus. That's never been problematic. You cannot then get out the things in the party boat to start partying. They have to wait until your turn. And next question, when a transport with multiple embarked units is destroyed, do all of those units have to disembark before rolling for mortal wounds? Yes. And this is a very important rule that I've personally seen many people get wrong. If you have a Rhino and you have, let's say, 2 units of 5 Dominions in it, you have to place all 10 models on the battlefield legally, adhering to everything we just talked about, before you pick the Rhino up off the battlefield. So this is saying you have to disembark or set up on the battlefield all of the units inside before you start rolling to see which ones die. You can't try to kill yourself down to make them fit.
That is correct. Great assessment. So continuing on to disembarkation, another Q&A. We're going to have 5 more, or 3 more of them rather, and 2 statements. After my unit disembarks from a transport that has not yet moved this phase, my unit must make a normal or advanced move. When it ends that move, can an enemy unit make a reactive move? Yes, provided the conditions of the reactive move are met. So basically, this just gives you the ability to reactive move when you're disembarking, when the disembarks from a transport itself. But you have to physically move. So you can't set up. You have to actually move the unit, and then you can do reactive moves as well. Moving on to the next Q&A. When a transport with multiple embarked units is destroyed, who decides the order in which those units disembark? That transport's controlling player decides. So if you have multiple units inside of a Rhino, for example, let's say you have a Chaos Rhino with Karn the Betrayer, a Master of Execution attached to a unit of 10 Berserkers, and that vehicle is destroyed, you get to choose the order if you want to take out Karn first by himself or the unit of 10 and then Karn. But you choose that order.
This is very important because normally the player whose player turn it is has priority to decide, but this specifically lets the controlling player pick how this unfolds.
That's a great point you put up. Thank you very much, and everyone enjoys that. Can the fire overwatch stratagem be used to shoot at a unit that just disembarked from a transport? Yes, this includes unit that just disembarked from a transport that arrived from reserves in the same phase. And this is only because it states specifically in Overwatch setup. Because the unit is being set up after disembarking, you can use Overwatch. Not because it's made a normal move, but because it's been set up.
And I believe the only transport that can disembark the same turn it arrives from reserves is the drop pod, correct?
It is forced to, correct.
Yes.
Embarked units and reserves. So units embarked within a reserves model can disembark in the turn that model is set up. When they do, they cannot be set up within 9 inches horizontally of one or more enemy units. They count as having made a normal move. C count as having made a normal move. They cannot declare a charge this turn unless a rule specifically states otherwise, but they can otherwise act normally in the remainder of the turn. Hint, hint, salt ramps potentially helps you do charges, right? Or if you're using the new World Eaters Codex and it allows you to hop out of your vehicle and charge out of your vehicle, which I believe there's one niche case that you can, that would be one of those cases that would allow you to do so. Otherwise, you cannot charge.
So on to emergency disembarkation. If a transport model is destroyed and it is not possible to set up a disembarking unit wholly within 3 of that transport model and not within engagement range of enemy models, remember the wrapping trick we talked about earlier, that unit must instead perform an emergency disembarkation. This is performed as described for disembarking from a destroyed transport model, except that a unit does not have to be set up wholly within, or does so, must be wholly set up within 6 rather than the normal 3 inches when you voluntarily disembark, and not within engagement rate of enemy models. And when rolling for each disembarking model, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound on a roll of 1, 2, or 3 instead of each roll of 1. If for any reason a disembarking model still cannot be set up, that model is destroyed. So when a vehicle is destroyed normally, say you have it out in midfield or on your expansion and no one's near you, everything inside has to roll. You roll a die for, let's say, 10 models, for example, and every roll of a 1 is a mortal wound to a model or a unit of your controlling player's choice. But if you are now unable to deploy legally within 3, you get an extra 3 inches, a 6-inch aura, but you triple the risk of mortal wounds now. Rather than just on 1s, it's 1, 2s, or 3s. Going on to the FAQ. When a rule instructs a player that they must set up a unit on the battlefield, e.g. disembarking from a destroyed transport, emergency disembarkation, or a drop pod assault ability, If there is not enough space to set up every model in that unit, while adhering to any limitations on where the models can be set up, what happens to the unit and to the models that cannot be set up? The answer: the unit can still be set up, but any models that cannot be are destroyed. See setup on the battlefield in the rules commentary. Those models are considered to have been destroyed by the opponent's army, but not by any specific models or units. And this carries all the same caveats we talked about earlier from normal disembarking and not being able to fit.
And moving on to the final segment, which is Desperate Escape Test. Unlike when making other types of moves, models can move over enemy models when making a fallback move, as if those enemy models were not there. But you must take a Desperate Escape Test for each model that will do so, excluding models that are Titanic or can fly, before any models in that unit are moved. In addition, if a unit is battle shocked when it's selected to fall back, you must take a Desperate Escape Test for every model in that unit before they are moved. Each time a Desperate Escape Test for a model, roll a d6. For each roll of 1 or 2, one model from that unit that is falling back is destroyed, selected by the player who has the models, of course. The same model can only ever trigger one Desperate Escape Test per phase. Now, why is this very relevant to have the actual stratagem for the core rulebooks where it states command rerolls? You can actually use the command reroll stratagem to reroll your Desperate Escape Test. This is something that a lot of people don't know or just don't remember because they usually don't use it for this particular scenario, but you absolutely can. And this ability happens and goes around in a lot of data sheets, one of them being the Exalted 8-Bound in the New World Eater's Codex. They actually have an ability that affects only monsters and vehicles, and if that unit falls back from that unit, they must take a Desperate Escape Test. So that's just one of the niche situations where they're actually being used. I know orcs have them as well, and a lot of different other factions.
And also, fun fact that I just learned, General Slaughter, what happens if you try to fall back, I don't know, a Land Raider through enemy models?
Desperate Escape Test. 100%. If you try to pivot it and there's models wrapping you around and you're trying to get out of dodge, Desperate Escape Test on that Land Raider. And on a 1 or 2, bye-bye 240, 260 points.
And then because the Land Raider was destroyed, anything inside of that with the transport capacity would also then have to adhere to Desperate Escape or emergency Desperate Escape, disembarking or emergency disembarkation rules we've already gone over. So it can cascade down the line.
Multiple ways to understand Desperate Escape, understanding disembarkation and emergency disembarkation. This is a lot of information that a lot of people really don't seem to remember because it's not used quite often in the game, right? You don't see these niche case scenarios a lot. You don't see where you have to pivot your vehicle because you want to get out of dodge, not knowing you have to do a Desperate Escape Test. Or if you have an ability that allows you to move through screens, you still have to take a Desperate Escape Test, right? So remember, there are rules out there that you still always have to adhere to, even though it doesn't state you can't do it. That means there are rules that you still have to adhere to, like Desperate Escape Test.
Fun exception, Khorne Lord of Skulls does not have to take Desperate Escape Tests. Because it is a Titanic, so big knights, anything with the Titanic keyword, exempt from this. But things like Bellicor, Armigers, Land Raiders, great unclean ones, all perfectly legal to just 1 in 3 chance to lose them if your battle shocked to try to fall back.
Scarbrand, because he does not fly. He's got his wings ripped off. So.
Yeah. So, and this is not mortals. There is no final pain. There is no blanking damage. The model is destroyed flat out. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us for this. I hope you learned something. I'm going to be honest with you. I learned something live on cam here, as you all saw.
We both did.
Exactly. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next one.
Once again, thank you so much. As always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, Onslaught Gaming 40K, where victory is just a strategy away. Thank you so much to everyone. Show some love and have a wonderful day or night.